God, every day this man does something that I just think you can't get any better. Today, Donald Trump, a 78-year-old who's never earned a real paycheck in his life, was putting on a show, playing dress up at McDonald's to act like he is one of us. I mean, think about that. I mean, he spent his life screwing over workers, and his next act, Project 2025, will make it even harder for Pennsylvania workers and their families to get by, all while making Trump and his billionaire buddies even richer. But again, another twisted irony in Trump's dress-up show today. Kamala Harris doesn't have to put on a show. She doesn't have to play dress-up at McDonald's because she actually wore the uniform. She is one of us that's worked her way up through the ranks, and she had to work to make a living just like the rest of us do.
Christian nationalist leaders are saying that the Jezebel spirit, a concept with deep racist and misogynistic roots, is working through Kamala Harris and other female Democratic candidates in a way to frame the 2024 election in terms of spiritual warfare. The term is inspired by the evil biblical Queen Jezebel. Jezebel has long been used to degrade women and especially Black women. In the time of slavery, Jezebel was used to justify the systemic rape of Black women and girls by casting them as overtly sexual and untrustworthy. The Jezebel spirit has even further sinister connotations. It's the idea that demonic forces are working through progressive candidates and causes in spiritual battle between good and evil. The movement believes that Donald Trump is God's anointed one and must win the 2024 election. The Jezebel spirit is also often associated with abortion rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and feminism. But scholars say when used against Harris, it's impossible to separate the Jezebel spirit from its racist and misogynistic origins. Some Christian nationalist leaders are saying that the
Welcome to Let It Be Known. And y'all see her on the screen with the green glasses. Love the green glasses. Rashonda Tate is with us this morning. Lots going on. We have actually we got a pretty interesting conversation coming up later in the program this morning. We're going to be talking with Elizabeth Linos, who is the Emma Bloomberg Associate Professor of Public Policy and Management at Harvard Kennedy School, talking about a study titled "The Effect of White Co-workers on Black Women Careers." That should be a very enlightening conversation. There was Elizabeth Linus headed a study on this, and it's a comprehensive study too. It's not one of those, well, we asked 7 people. It's like they really went into this, and it's a really interesting find. So stay tuned, folks. We're going to bring her in a little bit later this morning, but stay tuned. We got more reasons to stay tuned because we got Rashonda with us, so that's more than enough reason to stay tuned. But we got some other things to talk about, including the disrespect and ignorance. Is staggering. 3 washed out Black ex-athletes showed up for Donald Trump over the weekend and not only vowed support for the 34 times convicted felon and adjudicated sexual predator, but two of them, I should say, had the audacity to either wear a shirt or vocalize calling Vice President Harris a, quote, tramp. Le'Veon Bell, of course, is the bad actor. We're going to get into that. Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro said that Elon Musk's plan to give money to registered voters in Pennsylvania is deeply concerning and is something that law enforcement could take a look at. We'll also discuss that as well. Donald Trump threatens to defund schools who teach about slavery. Folks, it's out there. It is out there. And Rashonda, here's one other thing. Before we get into everything else. So at a campaign rally this weekend, right? Donald Trump, he started talking about the legendary golfer, Arnold Palmer. Now, this is how unserious people got to be to support this guy. He went in there, his campaign said he was going to start making his closing arguments as to why he should be elected. So, Rashonda, he says, he starts talking about Arnold Palmer and even praised the late golfers in front of his daughter. Now, Arnold Palmer's daughter was at this event. Praised his tell you. Um, and he goes on to say, Arnold Palmer was all man. He says, I say that in due respect to women. This is a guy that was all men. He says when he took the showers with other pros, they came out there and said, "Oh my God, that's unbelievable." He says, I had to say, we have women that are highly sophisticated here, but they used to look at Arnold Palmer as all men. And then he goes on this rant about the vice president and then he ties everything back to, Arnold Palmer, who he says, "We got more guys who are kinda casual, but then you got Arnold Palmer." He says, "They can't look any better than Arnold Palmer." Rashonda, how do you how do you support something like this? I mean, I know you don't support him, but how how do you justify supporting something like this?
It is just unreal to me. As a journalist, we try. I don't see how anybody thinks this is okay. But one of the things that has just astounded me are his surrogates. So they are making the rounds defending this, saying that he's joking. And I heard one yesterday. One analyst tried to equate it to when Barack Obama spoke at the Democratic National Convention and made the hand gesture. So he's trying to say, well, nobody said anything when Barack Obama did that, but everybody's getting mad because Donald Trump joked. It's your closing argument, and this is your joke. But it is all about this machismo, with this whole macho thing that he's trying to tap into. That's the argument he wants. I don't see how anyone can look at this man and say he is fit for office.
If we keep seeing constant and overt signs when I keep going back to that cognitive decline that they said that Joe Biden has experienced, and they promptly removed him from the ballot and replaced him. And there has not been one call for him to be removed. Now, obviously, it's only 2 weeks, but to go. But I'm talking. This didn't just start.
Right. They're justifying the people enjoyed the dancing. Those people did not come to that town hall to watch him dance for 49 minutes or whatever you call that, this move he does. It is just ludicrous. And I watched these surrogates spin themselves into pretzels trying to defend it. I understand they're not going to come on and say our candidate is crazy, but it just seems like to me, it almost seems like they're going, okay, we know JD Vance is going to be president, because if Donald Trump wins, they're going to have to invoke the 25th Amendment because the man is gone. And I can
He's
only
totally
see it
gone.
getting progressively worse.
And see, that's Greer's been talking about that too, and that, about JD Vance. That seems to be the Heritage Foundation and others' ultimate plan
Yeah.
anyway.
Yeah.
JD Vance is, I mean, the guy came out of nowhere. Number one, he's just uh, he just does not in any way qualify to be a vice president or a president, but that's their guy.
I think that's the plan from the beginning, because no way they're looking at Trump and everything he's doing right now and saying, yep, this is our candidate. Yep, this is the guy we want guiding us for the next 4 years. This is all, to me, a diabolical plan, and I am not a conspiracy theorist. But the Heritage Foundation spent forever putting together a 900-page document. They know what they're doing.
Exactly. And everybody's been pointing out, and you pointed out there in Texas, as early voting begins. Southbound 3000 says early voting will decide the next president. Orangey says early voting begins in Louisiana. He also says, I have never seen so many scary white people in my life. A 78-year-old bigot controls the mainstream media. Mike V says we have some feedback. We've been working on that, Mike. Thank you so much. But nonetheless, it's just preposterous that um, this guy he's got so many supporters, and among them now, former Pittsburgh Steelers greats Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell attended Donald Trump's rallies in Pennsylvania this weekend. Brown was sporting a "Make America Great Again" cap, and Le'Veon Bell greeted fans at the rally ahead of the rally. Um, a- and it was absolutely disgusting. No matter how you feel, what candidate you back, but this is disgusting. He not only wore, as we see that T-shirt, um, but he said it at the rally as well. How does how do you allow yourself to be so ignorant and be denigrated to the point you're calling this black woman, an accomplished, very accomplished black woman, a tramp?
A
Rashonda,
tramp
it's
with all
crazy.
your baby mamas, but do you have black sisters, black mamas, black aunties, the black grandma? Do you have any of those blacks? Now, I don't know if one of your 6 baby mamas is black or not, but the fact that you are letting yourself be used to denigrate a black woman is absolutely unbelievable to me. And I know they'll never see my little tweets, but I had to tweet. Donald Trump will not look your way November 6th. You are not the type of man he would ever have in his circle. And yet you denigrate the black women in your life, in your world, putting her down like this for what? So you can shuck and jive for Donald Trump and the MAGA folks? Okay, I'm all for it. If that's who your policies align with, fine. But why do you have to denigrate black women in the process?
Well, and Bakari Sellers says that he says support who you want, but a black woman birthed you, and your disrespect is crazy. You're a whole clown. As your neck continues to turn green, I'll keep you in my prayers. Others tweeted out, "Pathetic, self-hating fool" is what they described Le'Veon Bell, and it just go. It's unbelievable that this guy, as you mentioned, 7 kids with 6 different women, wears a T-shirt calling a happily married woman,
Yeah.
a very accomplished woman, a tramp. And this is not about, and folks, this is not about supporting someone. This is about, it's just wrong. It's flat out disgusting.
And
It's
let you get
flat
in
out
any
disgusting.
trouble, you gonna come running back to the black community. And there's also Lord Jamar that called her the B word. And I now he's apologizing. He actually apologized the other day, but
Mm,
nobody wants to hear your apology. You knew what you were doing. It's almost like these people want to be relevant, and someone from the Trump campaign reached out to them, and now they feel relevant. And so it is a sad testament, especially behind a man who wouldn't blink twice your way. Prime example, he was on stage with Sage Steele yesterday.
mhm.
And she's one of those that sold out and just kisses his boots. And he said, well, we're gonna have a good time, Paige. He can't even be bothered to learn your name.
Yeah, yeah. And you're right. He can't even be bothered. I mean, we all remember the Diamond and Silk
Yeah.
minstrel show, and when one of them, out of Diamond or Silk, whatever, whichever one died, and he surprisingly showed up at a memorial service and didn't know who she was.
Yeah.
He says, "Oh yeah, I don't remember her, but I do know this one."
But that's indicative of who he is. He did the same thing with the Latino rapper or music producer, the artist who really alienated his base, lost tons of deals when he was at a rally, and Donald Trump told Nikki to come on out and said he's hot, she's hot, and it's a he. That's how little he cares about any of these people that are selling out their communities, that are just licking their boots to be a Trumpster. And it is just disgusting.
It is the most awful display. you could probably possibly ever in the history of American politics. David Youngblood says misogyny is real. Austin says those three he says those three coons wore soft helmets. Mike V says mental decline. And Power 96 says it's a lot of black people who I will not think twice about after this election. So he says stay over there with Mr. Charlie. No cookout or crawfish boil for them. And going going further, yeah, Thomas Hitman Hearns as another one. Now, what stunned me about this, I don't know if it stunned me because Thomas Hearns has been in some wars in the ring and punch drunk and everything else probably applies. But one of the things that stood out when he took the podium for Trump, Trump introduced him as one of the greatest fighters of all times. And this is what Tommy Hearns' response was. He says, hearing those nice words come from you, man, it's got to be real. It's got to be real. He says, myself, I never thought I was a great fighter. I thought I did a pretty good job, but hearing those words come from you, man, I am excited. I am very excited. It's like that validation. You need validation from Donald Trump when everyone in your sport and everyone in your, no matter what sport, when you think of great boxers and you run down the list of great boxers, Tommy Hearns' name is ultimately going to come up somewhere.
Mhm.
Did he need why? What's with this validation stuff, Rashonda?
You know, Luther Luke Campbell posted something that was pretty interesting to me. He said that the Trump campaign figured out they know that the Democratic Party isn't going to touch a lot of these people. They're not going to give the Le'Veon Bells and the Antonio, but they're not going to give them the attention. And
Mhm.
those people want to be part of something. And the Trump campaign has figured that out. So he said Donald Trump calls these black folks who represent the hood, is what Luke called them. But they're using them, asking them for their support. And these people are saying, yeah, I'll do it since you're the only one that called me. And they're feeling validated because someone has reached out to them. And it's so much bigger than that. But for some of these people, it's a pick me syndrome. I got picked, so yay, I can support you now.
Yeah, it's really sad because again, we're talking about in this case, we're talking about three successful professional athletes who got the cheers from thousands, from tens of thousands, who got hardware, trophies, and things of that. Um, who their play on the field, and in Thomas Hearns' case, inside the ring, earned him accolades that you would think they don't need this type of even at this point stages in their lives. Do they really need this type of validation?
You know, I guess at this point they're like, I'm being acknowledged. Roland Martin tweeted that he didn't even know where he was. It actually was kind of sad to me to watch him up there. I could barely understand him,
Tommy
but
Hearns, yeah.
but the Trump, they rolled him out, and they probably told Trump to say something about him being a boxing legend. Trump probably never even watched him because he's not, he wasn't in the same class and rolling with Trump.
Right.
I don't know how these people don't see that they're being used by a man that could care less after the election. He only cares now because he wants to peel off every little black person he can.
Yeah, and that runs with their narrative of black men and particularly are swinging toward Trump, and whereas there's no evidence of that except for these you grab these individuals, as someone said, clowns, as Bakari Sella said, clowns, and Elon Musk is putting them out there, on Twitter as much as possible. Um, and so people get this false impression that they speak for more than just themselves, which is just not true. It's just not true.
Yeah.
David Youngblood says the only response to these clowns with black mothers and sisters is to vote. He says we had black men as overseers on plantations.
Yeah. You know, where are Trump's black his black surrogates and these black people on the campaign trail who are intelligent, who are making the argument for their candidate in a logical way? Those are the people he's trotting out, because he could care less about how he's making the black community seem. He's like, here's my black. I got a black, and here they are speaking on my behalf.
Yeah, and that's exactly how he would say it too. Here's my black. And speaking of Elon Musk, Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro said
going to be awarding $1 million to randomly to people who have signed the petition every day from now until the election.
You are a former attorney general. Is this legal?
I think there are real questions with how he is spending money in this race, how the dark money is flowing, not just into Pennsylvania, but apparently now into the pockets of Pennsylvanians. That is deeply concerning. Look, Musk obviously has a right to be able to express his views. He's made it very, very clear that he supports Donald Trump. I don't, obviously we have a difference of opinion. I don't deny him that right. But when you start flowing this kind of money into politics, I think it raises serious questions that folks may want to take a look at.
So you think it might not be legal, yes or no?
I think it's something that law enforcement can take a look at.
We're going to be awarding.
Rashonda.
Well, where can I sign up to get this $1 million? I mean, that's first. It's so crazy, you know. And what's crazy to me about that is that there are a lot of people that will sell their vote. He's saying right now it's just to sign the petition, but we know what he's doing. They're trying to buy votes, buy support, and the audacity to me of them to break the law, to just do what they want to do without consequence. That the Trump campaign is just, there's a different set of rules, a different set of standards. If Biden had done any of this, if Kamala Harris had done any of this, Republicans would be calling a session right now to try and file some charges, impeach everybody. But it's acceptable on their side.
Yeah, it is. As David says, when is bribing legal?
Right.
Because that's an overt. There's nothing undercover about that. That's an overt bribe right there.
And what I think people need to understand, if Donald Trump and his people will do this kind of stuff out in the open, what do you think he's going to do when he's president and the Supreme Court has basically given him presidential immunity? We will see stuff we have never seen the likes of. He's doing this now. It's going to be 10 times worse if he wins.
Oh, and also, just to go along with what you said, we did a story for Black Press USA on Friday afternoon about the fact that Trump, when he was president, how he not only overcharged the Secret Service for his and other folks, foreign dignitaries and others at his hotel in Washington, but he went way above. For instance, it was supposed to be the per diem. It was supposed to be something like $214 a night. He charged about $900 a night. These dignitaries came in. These also people that wanted to try and get pardons for their loved ones. He charged them something like $800 something a night at his properties. It's pay to play. It's a pay to play presidency, obviously.
And it will be 10 times worse. And his colleagues will not call it out. There's the whole nepotism thing that was going on. I mean, Ivanka and Jared, how much money did they make? And Jared can't even get Secret Service clearance, security clearance. And it really is. It's back to that different set of standards for Trump and his family. Trump, when you look up grifter in the dictionary, his picture is right there with
It's right
a
there.
picture of a watch in one hand and a sneaker in the other.
Oh God. And speaking of grifter, real quick on that note too, we saw you may have saw images of Trump in a McDonald's over the weekend. That was totally turns out that was totally staged. The place was closed down totally, and they had pretty much actors come through the drive-through, whatever, and him serve it and and they presented it as, oh, this is real. No, it was not.
It was not real, but let me tell you the power of Madam Vice President Kamala Harris. She has irritated that man so to make him go put on a McDonald's apron. First of all, whenever you ever seen anybody but the dishwasher wearing an apron at McDonald's? But she has gotten under his skin so much that she made him go to McDonald's to put on a uniform, trying to disprove that she worked there, 40 years ago. It's absolutely insane. And his
Insane.
people were like, "Oh, this is so great. This is the best political move ever." And that's what you're doing in the last 2 weeks before the campaign. Okay.
Wow. Well, and real quick, in a bizarre appearance on Fox News, Donald Trump sat on a small couch with the network's host, and hopefully that wasn't the same couch that his vice president candidate used before. But he sat on a small couch with the network's host and gave a jarring answer when posed with a scenario about what to do with schools that teach the truth about American history. He essentially, Rashonda, said that anybody teaching slavery, um, he's going to defund them. He's to defund those schools, which is, it's Project 2025,
Project
which he continues
2025
to try and distance himself from for whatever reason. But go ahead.
that he knows nothing about, but he's on Fox News laying out the ground. He's telling you what he's going to do. And his surrogates continue to go, "Oh, he's not going to do that. Donald Trump, he's just mouthing off. He's going to do whatever he wants." Yes, schools will lose funding for teaching about Harriet Tubman, for teaching about slavery. We already had a problem here in Texas with them trying to change textbooks to make it seem like slavery was a mutual beneficial thing, that Black people enjoyed being slaves. We've had to fight that issue itself. Now, if you have Donald Trump at the top, our kids coming up will know nothing about it because it will be erased from our textbooks. Oklahoma will have Bibles in their they'll have Trump Bibles at that in their schools.
Which they would have had to have paid for
Right.
dearly. Those gold Bibles.
Yeah. At $60 a buck.
Good night. How are they allowing this stuff, Rashonda?
They're scared. They're scared of Trump. I watched Mike Johnson on State of the Union on CNN, and he twisted himself in every kind of direction trying to justify everything that Trump was doing, because they know if they speak out against them, he'll call them a name and their rabid cult supporters will turn on them. Now, again, there are some people that just agree with Donald Trump and his policies. That's the diversity of America. It is the rabid people, the people that are like cult like that now, because Donald Trump cozies up to Putin, they now believe Putin's not all that bad. And it's just like he has some kind of hold. He's a Jim Jones. He's Jim Jones 2.0.
I say it all the time. I say it all the time. And I believe 1000% that if indeed this man at any of his rallies passes the Kool-Aid, the
Yep.
literal Kool-Aid with the cyanide in it, they will drink it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just the
Sad
bottom
state.
line. It's really, really sad state of affairs. American politics is just, it is what it is, as they say, but it is the worst
Yeah,
ever
and
been.
I watch the Kamala HQ on social media. Her social media team is on it, but it's gotten to the point now that all they have to do is retweet his words.
Yeah.
They don't have to make anything, just retweet it verbatim, and it sounds insane.
Yeah. And I will say this about the vice president's social media team. They do a heck of a job. It's was it Kamala HQ headquarters?
Yes.
They do a phenomenal job of just like you said, he said the craziest stuff he says, just tweet it out. This is the other choice you have.
Right.
Right. Just putting it out there. And I it appears to be effective. We'll ultimately find out in 2 weeks, right?
Yeah, I am hopefully optimistic because I'm hoping that you got white women that will get in the booth and will be like, I know my husband wants me to vote for Trump, but I just can't do it. And then they walk right out, yes, honey, I voted for Trump, but they cast their vote for Kamala and Tim. I just hope that America does the right thing. I don't know. I'm not one, I didn't write Trump off the first time.
Mhm.
And so the bottom line is we have to turn out.
Yeah, well, and they keep telling you how close things are, so I
Yeah.
guess we will see. We are thrilled to be joined this morning with a special guest, Dr. Elizabeth Linos, the Emma Bloomberg Associate Professor of Public Policy and Management at Harvard University. Her recent work delves into the complex and often overlooked challenges that Black women face in predominantly white workplaces, especially with high-wage professional service firms. Her groundbreaking research based on over 9,000 new hires shows how being assigned to whiter teams early in their careers can significantly increase turnover and reduce promotion rates for Black women. Dr. Linus, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Great. And so, I mean, let's just jump right into this study. And one of the things I appreciate when we talk about studies, is how in depth they are. And this appears to be very much so one of those studies that's really in depth. It finds one of the things I noticed is it finds that Black women are 51% more likely to leave a firm within 2 years when assigned to teams with more white coworkers. What is it about these team dynamics that make such a stark difference in their career outcomes?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the big question, but thank you for reading the study so closely. There's a couple things that are important. So one is you're absolutely right. We're looking at one of the largest professional services firms. These are the kinds of jobs that are predominantly white, especially at leadership, and they're the kind of firms that are super high wage environments where there's been a lot of effort on kind of recruiting a more diverse workforce into junior positions. And what this study shows is that that's not enough, because if Black women are in work environments that don't allow them to thrive, where we see kind of different outcomes, they're more likely to leave. And they're less likely to get promoted. And so there's something that's happening within the firm. This isn't kind of a pipeline situation. It's things that are happening in those workplaces, in those interpersonal dynamics. We're still trying to figure out exactly what the cause is, but there's a couple things that we know. First, we know that it's not about the education, experience, skill level, where they went to college, like all the background characteristics of the Black women themselves. We can control for all of that. We also see that it's not that they're being assigned to different types of projects that might be less likely to get you a promotion. What we do see is that when there are more white women and white men on a team, those new hires that are Black women are labeled as lower performers in their first performance evaluation. And again, this is not about kind of the objective criteria of performance evaluation. It's about the rest of the team composition that seems to be affecting their performance ratings. So that's one thing we're digging into now, which is what's happening in those conversations. They're behind closed doors. That means that Black women are more likely to be labeled as low performers. The other thing that we're looking into is, what could potentially happen with network. So this firm is similar to other firms where you get assigned to some first projects, but then it's kind of up to you to get on the good projects in the future, to be staffed to the kind of high status projects. And we're starting to see differences there as well, where Black employees are less likely to be in kind of future projects staffed on the highly promotable, high status projects. So we're digging into that as well.
Yeah, Rashonda, you go.
Yeah, for me, it's really looking at, I work for a Black newspaper now, so I'm no longer in the white environment, but I spent many years there, but we walk a fine line. There is you can't be too get too mad about something. You can't you have to control your emotions, or else you'll be deemed the angry Black woman. So when you're carrying those work stresses, and then you go home and you have home stresses, and you come back and there's this tightrope that you are constantly on, I can see that contributing to that turnover.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the main focus of this study is 7 years of data, thousands of employees, but we also did qualitative interviews with employees. And that's what we heard from a lot of Black women, that in their kind of day-to-day experience, they felt like they weren't getting feedback. They were hearing nothing basically from their supervisors, and then something was happening behind closed doors and they weren't getting the kind of top performance label. Or their supervisor might invite the rest of the team out for dinner and kind of not invite them at the same level. So there's a lot of things happening that all seem small and kind of part of daily interactions that actually make a huge difference in whether people are given equal opportunity even to succeed at the firm.
And for me, I also see our opportunities. Like, I actually was in television news, and there are if you have a morning Black anchor, that position is kind of solidified. And then if another Black woman comes along, there's this tenseness, because we're not going to have two morning Black anchors, or you're not going to have two Black women in leadership. So there is that tenseness, that stress that you carry when another Black woman walks into the room. You want to open up and extend yourself, but at the same time, there's this concern about my own job, because they're not going to look at having all of these women in positions of power.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point. And that's kind of what we see across a bunch of projects that we're doing. There's more and more, there's still a long way to go, but there's more and more diversity at the junior levels. But then as soon as you look at who gets promoted, supervisory positions, leadership positions, you still see kind of the classic predominantly white male environment. And that's clearly things that are happening in the firm, not things that were happening before someone joined the organization.
And Elizabeth, you describe the effects on Black women as intersectional, where neither Black men nor white women experience similar impacts. Could you explain why Black women in particular are so vulnerable to these peer effects?
Yeah, there's two things that I think this study points to. One is, at least in the academic world, for a long time, we would talk about people of color as though the experience of all people of color is the same. And we really wanted to dig into not only differences by race and ethnicity, but how that intersects with gender. And we know from so many other studies that Black women in particular face a double disadvantage, both because of their race and because of their gender. And we wanted to see what that means in a workplace that is predominantly white and male. And what we find is exactly to your point, even though overall, there's still kind of a very clear disparity where Black employees in general are less likely to get promoted, more likely to leave. Black women in particular are much more affected, statistically significantly more affected by having more white coworkers. And we're able to dig into that intersectionality for those white coworkers as well. And it looks like both white men and white women play a role in that disadvantage. At least in the data, it looks like for promotion, the effects are larger if you have more white men on your team. But this is a firm where, the highest promotion rate is actually for white women. So this is not a firm where, white men are consistently doing better, but, in line with a lot of other research, white women are being promoted at the highest levels in this case, and Black women are doubly disadvantaged, both because of gender and race, we think.
Yeah, and the report, the studies showed that Black women on whiter teams are more likely to be labeled as, quote, low performers and report fewer billable hours. Can you break that down some more for us? What's happening here? Is there a case of bias in evaluations, fewer opportunities, or both?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. One thing that we know about this firm, which is not unlike many other firms of this kind, is that the process of doing these performance evaluations is highly subjective. So we talked to a lot of employees of all races and genders that felt, uncertainty and fear and anxiety about this performance evaluation process because it wasn't very transparent. They would do some work, they had some, objective criteria, but ultimately a bunch of people got in a room and had a conversation about who was the high performer who was going to get promoted, and there wasn't a lot of transparency about what that process looked like. In those conversations, it looked like Black women were much more likely to be labeled as low performers, again, when their peers were more white. It's not really about the specific individual. And I'm a behavioral scientist, and we see this in a bunch of different areas. When you have a lot of uncertainty or not a lot of transparency about what the criteria are, it's very easy for people to revert back to their gut feelings or their kind of emotional responses or their biases about who fits, who belongs there, who's a good employee. And so one thing that a lot of behavioral scientists work on is how do we make sure that those performance evaluation processes are clear and structured and don't allow for human bias or human instincts to really be the driver of who gets promoted or who's asked to leave. And that's really a structural question, right? How do we build staffing systems in an intentional way? How do we build performance reviews in an intentional way so that we're not just asking people to kind of go with their gut or talk about fit? Because that's really where a lot of bias creeps in.
How can this study help people realize their bias, especially when it comes to implicit bias? A lot of people don't realize it, and if you were to point it out to them, they'd immediately become defensive. How can we use this information to help people see that implicit bias that exists within?
Yeah, I think for me, and I'd be curious if you agree, it really helps to have the numbers, right? So what we're showing in this study is not different than what a lot of people have experienced in their day-to-day work and have been saying for a really long time, that this is their lived experience at work. I think this study might help because the numbers are so stark. So it's a very rigorous quantitative analysis. We're looking at over 9,000 new hires. We're looking at their networks of more than 100,000 people over 7 years. So it's a lot of kind of really rigorous work to say, look, I know you think the problem is a pipeline problem or a recruitment problem or a mentorship problem, but actually the data doesn't pan out in that way. And so I'm hoping that the data and the ability to really focus on this intersectionality, really look at the difference for Black women in particular, and other groups, in particular, can start that conversation. The one thing that I do want to emphasize, and I think this study points in this direction, is that there's a lot that the firm can do, right? And that white supervisors need to do differently and white leaders need to do differently. This isn't really a situation where if you can just increase overall representation, somehow you're going to change workplace dynamics. And I think the data really points to that.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, one of our viewers, Mike V, says that with all of this anti-DE and I legislation, how can we approach this without the backlash of either being fired or ostracized for bringing it up?
Yeah, I wish I had a good answer to that question. I think it's a really important one. To me, it really comes back to looking at the data and objective information. So I think it's important that scholars present what the information looks like today. This is a study of a current firm. This isn't from the 80s or the 90s or the 60s. It's happening today. But I also think that we put a lot of pressure on these very broad DEI initiatives without necessarily resourcing them effectively, thinking about whose behavior needs to change, thinking about what kinds of structural changes need to happen in workplaces. And so, one thing I think a lot of us are thinking about is how do we go from an environment where we say, if we have a chief diversity officer, somehow we're going to solve day-to-day interactions, to really thinking seriously about testing different ways of changing the day-to-day interactions at work. I still believe deeply that we have a long way to go on equity and inclusion. For many people, at least people who aren't kind of in this space, there was a hope that you could kind of train people out of their biases with like anti-racism training. We don't have a lot of evidence yet that that's working. And so we still need to work hard to figure out what needs to change in the workplace at a structural level, because it doesn't seem like you can train your way out of these types of biases, at least not yet.
One of the things that I do like is like you said, is that there's the data to back up the things that you were saying, and that is what you can take to people. What are you guys doing? You know, we love it that you come on and you're talking with Let It Be Known News and spreading the word. What other things are you doing to get this study out there so that people can see that it's not just us talking on emotions? Here is some hard, raw data to support what we're saying.
Yeah, so a few things. The one is, speaking on shows like this one, making sure that the academic community is also on board. So we had to do it's a whole different conversation with white scholars and Black scholars to be like, this is what the data looks like, and really having them push, as they should, on like, is it, is the mechanism right? Are we getting it right? Is the data correct? Getting a lot of robustness out of that. But for me, the main kind of goal of all of this work is to then be able to go back to firms who are excited and interested and worried about what's happening in their firms and say, okay, look, we have this as a starting point. Let's not stop at describing the problem. Let's test solutions. So my team, as well as other teams, are really focused on experimental work in organizations that say, okay, what would it look like if we change the performance evaluation system? Let's test that in the same rigorous way that we did this study. What would it look like if we staff teams differently? Let's test that. What would it look like if we changed who was paired with whom when they first started a new firm? So I'm really excited to go back into organizations like this one and say, this is where you are right now. This is the baseline. Now it's our job to work together to try to figure out what works. And we're going to get it wrong, but I'd rather know than not know many times before we get it right.
And your paper also highlights that early career experiences are critical to long-term success, especially for Black women. Elizabeth, what immediate steps should companies take to ensure that these initial assignments and interactions don't set Black women up for failure?
Yeah, I think that's really critical. So we're still trying to figure out, especially what should be done during onboarding and in those early years. So a lot of my studies, not just in this setting, really focus on those first 2 years. We see really significant changes in people's career trajectories because it changes who you're connected to, whether or not you're considered a high potential employee early on. And so there's a couple of things that people are testing right now. One is, how do we set people up for success during onboarding? My worry is that a lot of those efforts are really putting the onus of change on the new hire. And as we already discussed, there's a lot going on for every new hire, but especially a new hire who is in an environment where they might be both a racial minority and a gender minority. So I'm actually really excited to think about how we change the behavior of managers of new hires. So we're excited to think about what kind of support, training, new information, nudges we can give to a supervisor about what it's like to work with new hires of different races and genders, what they need to do differently to support them, how to provide feedback in a way that's explicit, as opposed to doing it behind closed doors. And then, there's a big question about how to build stronger networks that we're still thinking through. Like, what is the right way to make sure that new hires are able to access the networks that make you successful at the firm, whether that's time with senior leaders in the firm, whether that's staffing them on projects that are high priority or high visibility projects, or whether that's really just creating opportunities of teams to be objectively rated in their performance ratings.
This study, as we said at the top, very, very comprehensive. Is there, when you think about this study as a whole, if there was one thing, Elizabeth, that you want people to take away from it, the most important thing, what would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for me, this kind of fundamental point that for Black women in these really high status elite firms, having more white coworkers can be detrimental to their career success. is in itself the headline finding, that there's something happening in those conversations, in those interactions, in those early days that has these huge consequences. And to me, that should put the pressure on white managers and white coworkers to rethink what's happening in those early days that is creating these disparities. We didn't have previous studies that looked at the effect of peers in these high status, high wage firms. And so I think this is really the headline finding. There's something happening in those teams that we need to pay more attention to. And the converse of that is, I think that means a little bit less attention to just thinking about pipeline, recruitment, kind of broader mentorship programs, putting the onus of change on white peers.
Shonda?
What would you like to see the Black women and the white, Black women and white women doing better, working together and changing these numbers in the future? What would be in your ideal world?
I mean, in my ideal world, anyone's performance evaluation shouldn't depend on who else is on their team, right? In my ideal world, anyone's opportunities to work on kind of high status projects should be identical and should have nothing to do with, of course, their race and gender and their peers. One thing I think we could start to look into is how to make all of the steps that lead to promotion or turnover more explicit. So in my ideal world, feedback would be much more transparent. Performance evaluations would be much more transparent. We'd be much more intentional about who gets staffed on which projects. And I think going back to the numbers helps here. So, in my world, we often say, like, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get managed. So being really intentional at looking, why is so-and-so getting more opportunities? What is it about this specific employee that means they get invited to, lunch with a senior member of the team? So for me, making all of that very explicit and transparent is kind of the first step. And I think all employees can kind of get behind that, because all employees, regardless of race and gender, feel that anxiety when there's uncertainty about who's going to get promoted and what the criteria of success are. It just so happens, and this is what we show in our study, that has much larger detrimental effects for Black women than other groups. But every employee can benefit from more clarity about how to succeed in a firm.
But isn't it a mindset that will be required, a shift in mindset to make these changes happen?
This is an important question. In a lot of my work, I have found that if we push too hard on changing the mindset and hope that then changes behavior, oftentimes we don't get there. What I'm hoping for is that sometimes if you change behavior and you change kind of the workplace dynamics because you've changed the structure in which people are acting, that then changes mindsets. So it's not that mindsets don't need to change. Absolutely. Mindsets are kind of at the core of what this study and other studies on this issue talk about. But I guess I feel impatient that first we would have to change everyone's mindsets, take away everyone's internal biases, and hope that changes behavior. I would rather focus on changing the behavior and seeing how that affects mindsets over time. So that's kind of a different approach that we see in a lot of behavioral science work, that oftentimes it's taking out the opportunity for mindsets to affect people's lives that is more impactful than really trying to convince them one by one that they're making a mistake.
Yeah, a couple quick things, Dr. Elizabeth Linos, before we let you go. Daniela Pierre is asking, she says she's curious to know, how much does image, hair, weight, etc., play a factor in how a woman is perceived and exposed to opportunities in the workplace?
Yeah, I mean, this is not part of this study, but the sad truth is that a lot of other studies have shown that all types of image are going to be important. And it goes back to this broader challenge that we have, that when people think about who is a successful employee, they have an image in their mind. For some people, depending on the firm, depending on the occupation, the image in their mind has a specific gender, has a specific race, has a specific height, has a specific weight. And so all of those things end up becoming an important part of how we think about what the ideal employee looks like. And of course, none of those things should matter. The work should matter. But there are many other studies that have shown that people who are taller, or people who are more beautiful, or people who are thinner end up being considered more successful, even more trustworthy in some studies. And the same, of course, applies for race and gender. We don't have a lot of solutions on how to change that, except more and more exposure. So the more you are exposed to people of different genders and races and ethnicities, that bias slowly creeps down. And so being in environments that are more diverse helps with that, but it's certainly an ongoing challenge. And going back to the beginning of this study, we did speak to a lot of women who talked about this challenge, that they had this additional burden of having to think about what they're wearing and what their hair looks like, and how they are perceived and whether they're perceived as serious. And all of those are additional costs that take up time that white men don't have in this firm. And so even that is an additional cost for new hires.
And finally, for me, what was there a particular thing, Dr. Elizabeth, that motivated you or motivated having this study?
Yeah, so this is, as you know, joint work with Dr. Sanas Mobasseri and Dr. Nina Lucy. And for us, we're just really interested in workplace equity considerations. A lot of my work is around how to recruit, retain, and support diverse talent in organizations. For this study, it actually started as a study that looked at kind of interactions at work. We were trying to understand more broadly what predicts who is successful in these types of firms and who isn't. And that's why we really tried to dig into the data, breaking it out in this kind of intersectional lens by race and gender. So that's where this started. Overall, my work tries to shift from thinking about how we describe the challenges at work to thinking about solutions more broadly. So what do we need to do differently to recruit people? How do we need to think differently about retention? But also questions around mental health and burnout and belonging, which have become a really big part of what it means to be an employee these days. And so, this started as kind of an exercise to understand what's happening in this firm. Why do we have more diverse talent in the junior roles, but still predominantly white leadership? And what we find is that those first 2 years really matter. You're less likely to get promoted on time. You're much more likely to leave if you're a Black employee. And so no matter what we do on the recruitment side, we're basically not doing enough at the workplace to make sure that translates into diversity in leadership over time.
Well, Rashonda, any last thoughts from you?
No, I think I love the study. I'm really glad you all did it because, like I said, it really helps us to have data when we go make this argument, and so that's exactly what this is. This is that the tools that we need to say this is more than just the emotions of a Black woman. This is a very real issue that should be addressed. So bravo on the study.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you for having me on the show. And truly, it's certainly, a lot more than emotion. It's also bad for the firm, right? It's costly when good employees leave. It's costly when good employees don't get promoted. And so this is a problem for everyone, not just for the Black women who are directly affected, but for firms that are competing for talent on the market.
Well, Dr. Elizabeth Linos, the Emma Bloomberg Associate Professor of Public Policy and Management at Harvard, we really appreciate this information. Very, very vital information, good information. And we thank you for joining Let It Be Known this morning.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Rashonda, that was interesting. Just a quick takeaway for you.
Yeah, it really is. Like I said, it helps us to have this data because we've made these arguments before and we get labeled as the angry Black woman. We get labeled as, oh, she's being emotional. And what ends up happening is we just leave. Black women just leave the jobs and go find another job. And then the cycle repeats itself. I don't know how optimistic I am that having the data will make them go, oh, okay, we're doing wrong. Let us try to do right. But it is, as Elizabeth said, it's a start.
You brought up a great point with the you gave the illustration of an anchor, a black woman anchor, another black woman comes in, and you know that the powers that be, they don't really want to see that.
Right, right. When I started out, I worked in Beaumont, Port Arthur, and my weatherman was black, and I was a morning anchor, the sole morning anchor, and we became known as the Black Station because there were two blacks on. It was only two, but it's no problem if you have two white people. But
Right.
thankfully, it shifted a little bit. But there's a lot of that that's still there. It was a joke in the town. That's the Black Station because we had two black anchors.
As David Youngblood says that, he says, folks, we are in a period of a backlash against everything and everyone not a white male. Mm, That's a
And it's
hard
gonna get
truth.
worse if you don't go vote. Go vote. Go vote. Go vote.
That is a hard truth right there. Rashonda, it's always a privilege to have you. She's taking just a mini break from her book tour, Sugar Hill, the Queen of Sugar Hill. Absolutely go get the Queen of Sugar Hill. She's done another fantastic job. Book number what? 54.
54. Yeah.
Wow. 54. That's
While
amazing.
still working as a journalist, managing editor at the Defender. So I love it.
Well, folks, go check out the Queen of Sugar Hill. It's a compelling story. It's not necessarily a biography. It's not fiction, but what do you call it?
It's biographical fiction. So you know how you
Bio-
watch a movie based on the life of Hattie McDaniel.
Yes, there you go. Based on the life. Look, see, you got a fan. Orange G says it's a great book.
Thank
So
you.
Orange G has purchased it and read it. So there you have it, folks. Rashonda Tate, always a privilege. Our love to Houston. We'll see. Hopefully, we'll have you again soon when you have some time for the little folks.
Yeah, we'll have to come back when we defeat Ted Cruz and say our new person is calling.
Oh, that
I'm
race!
speaking
How
it.
about that?
Yeah, tell me about it. That's
Wow.
what everybody got their eye on here.
And you know what's interesting too, real quick. So he's another one you mentioned, like kissing Trump's boots or whatever, right? I don't think that there's a place for him in Trump's administration.
At all of these people that are Trump is going to get in and do. There's no loyalty where he's going to say, oh, these people supported me, so let me find something for them. Trump will, if he wins November 6th, he don't know half these people that came out and spoke on his behalf. I never seen Ted Cruz
Cruz has
before.
embarrassed himself tremendously.
Really
He's one of
has.
those people that have embarrassed himself tremendously. And if he loses the election against Colin Allred, he's done. He's cooked, isn't he?
He's cooked, and if I was his wife, I'd be side-eyeing him constantly. It's like, so you just gonna let him dog me out, and you still up here stumping for him? Yeah, but it's a couple of them.
David is asking, and Rashonda, you're out there. What do you see? And he says, can Colin Allred really win?
He can, if we turn out. He's not going to get the rural areas, but if Texans turn out, Colin stands a very good chance. This is really a close chance. And remember, Beto O'Rourke almost beat Ted Cruz, and we had a lower turnout. So if we can get the people to the polls, there is a very good chance of Colin winning.
Wow. Well, it'll be interesting to see. Just a couple more weeks, and it'll answer all these questions, or may even bring more questions. Who knows? Join us, and thank you all for watching. Let it be known. We'll see you again tomorrow.
All right. Bye.